Look, we are back in lockdown, and this is not a great time for businesses, particularly businesses in New South Wales. So we're at week 4 of our current lockdown. New South Wales Government has provided some support packages which are available. They're a little bit confusing and a little bit delayed because we went into lockdown nearly 4 weeks ago, and we're only just getting to the stage where we can apply for those support packages. So we're just going to go through very quickly what's involved and how it works. And look, there are a lot more details, and you will need to go directly to Service New South Wales to make your application, and all the specific guidelines are available there. So the 3 big things for business owners are the small business grant, the small business payment, and the micro business payment. Now there's 3 different packages that mainly apply to business. And there's a few other packages or incentives really that apply to different specific industries or for specific purposes, and those things include payments for hospitality and tourism, payroll tax relief, land tax relief for landlords, some relief for clubs and the clubs and pubs industry, and some rebates for small business fees, which is not a new thing, that's been around since March, but they've thrown that into the mix, and some assistance for non-profit and performing arts businesses, organisations, music venues, which really need help at the moment. So we're not going to talk a lot about those additional ones. We're going to focus more on the 3 big ones because they are the ones that are really the most attention and probably the most value in terms of the dollar value of the support that's available there. There is an infographic which we've got here from the Small Business Commissioner, and look, we'll put a link to that below so you can see that it summarises it quite nicely, what the different aspects are, what's available, the starting dates and the periods that they apply to. So that's a good thing to have a look at, and we'll put a link to that in the notes below. So the main one that's getting the most attention is what we call the 2021 COVID-19 Business Grant, and that's on a sliding scale. So we're looking at how much you can get depends on how big a decline in turnover you've experienced. Now the period that we're comparing to is a minimum 2-week period from 26th of June 2021 through to 26 July 2021, and the year we're comparing it to is not last year but the 2019 year. So 2020 comparison's probably not going to be great because we're still in stages of lockdown at that point, but 2019 is probably the true position there. So the main one is a 30% or more decline, and that will get you a grant of $7,500. If it's 50% or more, it goes up to $10,500. For a 70% decline, you're looking at $15,000. So not huge amounts, but it is enough to support or at least put a bit more cash into your bank account at this time when a lot of businesses are just restricted completely from what they can do and operating. So we've had lockdowns affecting construction and trades and a lot more tighter stay-at-home orders in New South Wales, restricting businesses completely, limiting to essential services. So every little bit of cash flow coming into your business at the moment will be beneficial. So the main one here is looking at the grant, and this is available for businesses with and not-for-profits as well. So don't forget those businesses with Australian wages less than $10 million at 1 July 2020. So we've got to be very careful with the dates because they don't always match up with the current period. So there's some very different dates applied in the eligibility criteria. And your turnover for this one needs to be between 75,000 and 50 million. And that's for the year ended 30 June 2020. Now, there was a bit of confusion when this grant was first announced because it completely ignored sole traders and anybody with business under 75,000, and that's where that micro business grant comes in, and we'll talk a bit about that shortly. So just getting back to the COVID-19 business grant, you do need to retain your employees. That's one of the conditions. You do have to keep the same number of employees, broadly speaking. Now, the applications have only opened recently on the 19th of July this year, 19th of July 2021. And you may have gone there and you found that the website was just unable to take your application. It was overrun. So keep trying and follow the application process. We'll put a link to that website in the notes, but keep trying. It was under severe demand when it first opened up, and applications closed from the 13th of September this year. So we've got a bit of time to get that in, but if you're like most businesses, you're going to be wanting to get the cash in your bank account as soon as possible. So there's quite a few guidelines, and if you go to the Service New South Wales website, the guidelines are available in detail. There's still a bit of confusion about some of the exact criteria, and look, you're going to need to get some clarification if that applies to you. But in general, the majority of the guidelines are published on that website. And look, in those criteria, there's some of the basic things that we expect. You've got to have an ABN. Wages bill under $10 million, because that's one of the criteria. Your turnover is between 75,000 and 50 million. There's no, the cost that you're getting the grant for, there's no other support available. Now, what that means is if you're getting access to the rebate for fees and licenses, then you can't use this grant for that purpose. But I'm guessing that if you're in a position where you're applying for this grant, the business grant, then you're going to have expenses which are going to more than offset the amount of the grant that you're going to receive. So that's not going to be an issue for you. It's a turnover period of 30% or more due to the public health orders. So that over a minimum 2-week period, we're looking 26th June to 17th of July, and that's comparing to the same period in June or July 2019. And you do need to maintain your employee headcount for this period. Now, the Job Saver scheme also uses a very similar testing, and particularly for reduction in turnover. So the tests are being applied similar across these three types of grants. So they're just going back to that business grant. If you are in what we call a Victorian border location, and there's a list of those on the Service New South Wales website, then your testing actually comes forward to the 27th of May because of the issues there with Victoria. So it's the 27th of May to the 17th of July, you can choose those periods. So the funding, again, to be used for business purposes, and that includes things like utilities, wages, rent, financial, legal advice, marketing, communications, cost of perishable goods, and basically pretty much any activity that supports the business, the operation of your business. Like I said, it's a small grant, so it's not going to really, you're not going to profit from this. It's just there to replace your ability to fund your day-to-day operations of the business, and that's the purpose of it. The second part of this is what we call the Job Saver program, and that's a tax-free payment between $1,000 and $10,000 a week, and this is going to be paid fortnightly for that period from 18th of July 2021, and it's going to be paid to eligible employers, but also sole traders, including not-for-profits that have a turnover between 75,000 and 50 million. Now, the test applies, that turnover test. You've got to have a minimum of 30% reduction. Now, the catch here is that applications don't open for this program, for the Job Saver incentive, or I guess grant, until the 26th of July 2021. So applications are not open at this point. You can actually register your interest with Service New South Wales, and they'll tell you when it does become open. If you registered your interest for the business grant, I didn't actually get the notification that the process was open, so you may not have as well. But keep an eye on it. Mark that date in your diary. If you're going to apply by the 26th, or apply from the 26th of July. So there's also, when we first had this announcement, it completely ignored sole traders and micro businesses. So fortunately, New South Wales Government has stepped forward and addressed this to some degree, and they've now put in place what they call the micro business payment, and that's going to apply a tax-free payment of $1,500 to businesses with a turnover between 30,000 and 75,000. Now, that 30% decline in turnover test still applies. And to do that, though, if you're a sole trader applying for this, you can't also be in receipt of the federal government COVID-19 disaster payment, which is available. Now, Applications are not open at this point. They will be open late July 2021, so keep an eye on that process. Keep an eye on Service New South Wales and the government updates to find out when the application process opens. So there are a number of other different measures that apply in different ways, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on each one, but more just to make you aware that they exist and point you to perhaps the right place to get more information. And there is a lot, and not all of it applies to everybody, so we're just going to go very briefly into detail on a few of those things. So hospitality and tourism, there is an additional support grant for that area. Again, you've got to have the turnover of more than 75,000 and wages billed below $10 million as at 1 July 2020. There's more payroll tax relief being made available, including things like waivers for 25% for businesses with payrolls between 1.2 million and 10 million, but only where you've experienced a decline of 30% in turnover. And there's also some payroll tax deferral, so deferral to pay your payroll tax that you're due to pay, and some interest-free repayment plans. But you will need to contact Revenue New South Wales about those. Don't assume that they're going to apply automatically. You will need to be proactive and actually make contact and organise that payment arrangement. One of the questions we've already been getting is for business owners is, can we get a rent reduction, and what's the process that we apply to our landlord? Now, if we go back to 2020 when the incentives or the concessions were put in place for commercial rents, we had some very clear guidelines of how that would work. So this is actually a New South Wales government relief package, and it's to do more with land tax. So what they're doing is providing a land tax relief to landlords where they've provided relief to their tenants, and for a commercial tenant, it's where the commercial tenant is in a financially distressed position and is actually on receiving the business grant. So that's some of the conditions, and that concession could be up to 100% of their 2021 land tax liability. So there is a bit of a trade-off there, and there's going to be some negotiation and possibly some some conflict around this issue with landlords and tenants, particularly in commercial situations. And this land tax relief only applies for rent reductions made from now until 31 December 2021. So residential tenants not subject to land tax, there's a grant available for up to $1,500 where residential rents have been reduced. Or alternatively, there is a concession of up to 100% of 2021 land tax. If you think that applies to you, then you need to find out more details and make an application based on your circumstances. There's some more gaming machine relief for clubs and hotels. Small business fees and charges. Now, this one's actually been in place since the 1st of March 2021. So sole traders, small businesses and not-for-profits that are eligible can get a rebate of fees and charges up to $1,500. And these are from New South Wales government and local government charges that were due and paid after 1st of March 2021. There's some more assistance for what we call the commercial performing arts organisations, music venues, because they've really been hit hard by this. So it's part of an overall package of $75 million to support that industry so that they can continue to pay staff, performers and support for lost box office sale income because of the COVID restrictions and the lockdown. Now, applications for that, if that applies to you, are open from the 23rd of July 2021. So there you have a pretty fast-paced summary of the COVID concessions and relief payments that are available in New South Wales. We'll put links to the relevant details in the notes for you to follow. I encourage you to follow those through, and if you do need help, reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you.